Greetings, Professor Calarco. We at the Babeș-Bolyai University of Cluj, together with our partners from the National Institute of Materials Physics in Bucharest, we are implementing QTestrat, the project which will design the strategy for the deployment of a national quantum communications network in Romania. And we are very indebted to you because we wanted to ask you a few questions, since you are a person of such vast experience, of such vast views in the field. And
thank you. You are very nice of saying that. Thank you.
In the process, and in the same time, you are a person who has initiated some of the great institutions and strategies in the quantum communication in Europe. You are one of the initiators of the Quantum Flagship, one of the chairman of the governing bodies. So I think it would be the best, you are the best person to be asked a few questions about this very interesting and new field. And one, I would...
My pleasure. Yes.
I would start my question with this. What would be the essential steps that a small country like Romania should take in order to deploy an efficient quantum communication network, starting from zero?
Yes, so it's very, very important. I would say that there are different steps, so it should be done in stages. In the sense that if one says we are starting from zero, meaning that they may, it's possible that there are not so many, let's say, startup companies, for instance, or providers of such devices. And so it may be that, you know, in the beginning at least, it is not possible to find, you know, some vendors of these devices in Romania. However, of course, the goal is to stimulate not only the use, but also the production and the development of this technology in Romania. So I would say that the first step is based on the excellent researchers that you have there, to sort of starting from that, to you know, deploy devices which can be commercialized by startups from other European member states, and use the expertise which is available in Romania for the deployment, the you know, installation of these devices and the operation of the first network operations. So this would be the first step, would be indeed to create internally, based on the internal competence that exists in your country, to create this infrastructure and to start operation connecting, for instance, you know, a few cities within Romania. And it is my understanding that this is indeed one of the goals of the current EuroQCI project. Then in the following step, well, this should be accompanied, should be taken as an opportunity also for growth of competence on site, you know, competence in your country, in the sense that while you are going to use the knowledge of your own researchers and scientists for using these you know, devices, at the same time, it would be advisable that the same researchers and the same experts are also provided with some possibility for deployment, for development, in the sense that not only will they be users of these technologies as provided by external actors, external to Romania, but also they could indeed be, you know, starting to be developers of those technologies. And I suppose that this could happen with the provision of some research funds, for instance, for labs in your country and the like. A very important element also in the same vein is also to support the entrepreneurship, because in many cases it will happen that those colleagues who are active in using those devices, they have competence that you know, can not only be developed in terms of research, but also lead perhaps to the establishment of some startup companies. This is a very, very important step in which it would be very advisable in the next step, let's say on a couple of years time scale, to find some support from the government for that innovation. So in terms of those startups which can be created and which could already go a long way towards creating a competence in your country and a possibility in your country to also create value and of acquiring independence in terms of not having any more in the mid to long term, not having any more to buy these devices from providers outside of Romania. So this would be for the development of a proper ecosystem in your country. And then in parallel to this, of course, it's important to coordinate with the other member states and the other organizations around Romania and in Europe in the broadest sense, in such a way that the next step in EuroQCI can be prepared in terms of connecting between different, so creating links between different countries. So in this case, we can imagine that Romania with some neighboring countries could be in a position and should be in a position to really develop the international links which may be necessary for this kind of development. So this is another important aspect which I think could and should be taken into account in this context.
And I think in this context, another very important thing would be to have always a preoccupation for the standardization at the European level. So we have equipment in Romania, but it has to be compatible with the equipment in all the EU member states, and it is mutually usable.
Absolutely. This is indeed part of liaising with those international partners at the European level in the context of EuroQCI, the European Infrastructure for Quantum Communication. And so indeed, this is a very important part. And so the discussions and the connection to those other initiatives in the different member states is an integral part of this whole undertaking, for sure.
Would the EuroQCI and the Quantum Flagship act as a leader in coordinating this process of standardization?
Yes, this is certainly an important goal which EuroQCI has, and also the European Commission is setting this goal. But one reason why it is so important what we are saying now is that indeed this can only succeed out of a combined effort of all the actors that we have in Europe, and that really needs to be in a pan-European dimension. And therefore, it is very important, that your national strategy is involving is foreseeing a strong involvement of your country, your actors, your government in this direction, because this is exactly indispensable for proper success of this coordination. So it's a coordination which will be, yes, taken and started by the Commission, but it will only work if it is really accompanied and substantiated by the engagement of all the member states.
Related to the first question, I would ask you, what would be the main things to avoid when implementing such a national quantum network, communication network, in a state that has none up to this point?
Exactly. So the main thing to avoid would be to focus on just one dimension of the ecosystem. So if the focus would be only, as we mentioned before, onto acquiring those technologies from outside and simply buying them and deploying without building up an internal Romanian capacity, competence, and ability to deal with these devices, then this would be a problem, because it would not put your country in a sort of sustainable way along the way of really being able to be a thriving system for the future. So it means that a big error would be to forget about the research dimension, about the R&D, research and development dimension, and only focus on the purchase and the procurement, because this would work in the short term, but would not enable to reach independence and competence on the longer term.
You are known as a specialist in quantum control. And on the side of that, you have stressed repeatedly, I have read your interviews and your interventions, and you have stressed repeatedly the necessity of quantum hype control.
Yes, absolutely.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
For sure. So this is this is also connected to what we were just saying, in the sense that quantum technologies per se are not only a fascinating field, but a field which has, in the long term, very high promises for disruptive innovation. And the important aspect here is to manage expectations in a correct way, especially considering, and keeping awareness about the fact that these benefits are to be expected in the mid to long term. Now, of course, quantum is a field which has a nearer term promise for application and advantage than, for instance, quantum computing. However, it is very, very important to clarify what we can achieve with these devices, so that decision makers are not led into expecting benefits which in a short term, which can only come later. So it's very important. This hype control and expectation management is essential in keeping the long breath for this field, because we will only be able, since, as you mentioned, in some countries we are starting from scratch. It would be, if we don't have this long-term vision and we are not aware that this is a long-term vision, then we might not be able to really catch the opportunities. This is especially important for decision makers, as we must be aware from the side of scientists. We must understand that governments, they do not have a sort of budget horizon which can go beyond maximum a legislature, right? So no government can plan the budget for the successor government, which will come after a few years. At the same time, it is important that politicians and decision makers, while they are supporting decisions in this field, they must know that the outcome, or let's say the most important, the most promising results, they will not come during the typical lifetime of a legislature, of a government, but they require a much longer arc of time to achieve the the benefits of this infrastructure. So such investment is important to be started while knowing, and this is the important aspect of hype control, while being very aware that the benefits are to be expected over a longer time scale, and therefore, as much as possible, a certain degree of continuity between different governments. We know that, of course, obviously, in a democracy, when there is a change of government, obviously, it may be that the new government, and it is actually healthy and important that the new government will have its own priorities. However, a certain continuity and balance, which ensures that despite the difference in priorities which different governments may have, there is still this mutual understanding of the correct expectations, which will lead to advantage from quantum technologies, sort of passing the baton, one could say with a metaphor, between different governments, is a very crucial element in order to ensure that there will be sort of continued growth, and the efforts that we are initiating now are not somehow wasted, which they would be if at some point they would be interrupted. So continuity is essential here in such a long-term undertaking. A correct understanding of the proper time horizon is of paramount importance, And this is what we should expect from this hype control. We should avoid, as scientists, to just tell politicians that there will be some wonderful things which will come very soon, but we must advise them in the most honest way possible what is the real-time scale that they should expect, so that then we can achieve indeed the benefits that are to be expected as soon as possible, but not sooner, let's say.
So we would need a political quantum continuum passing this project from one administration to the other.
I think that's an excellent expression. Yes, that's really a political quantum continuum is really an excellent sort of designation for exactly what I have in mind. Yes.
Is it safe to say, also linked to this quantum hype control, that the quantum technologies are very specialized tools that can perform very well very specialized tasks, and that they are not universal solutions to every conceivable problem?
It's very, very important to state that. Indeed, and of course, we are working to extend the applicability, for instance, of quantum computers to a growing number and range of use cases. However, at the moment, the quantum algorithms that we are aware of, they work for a limited number of use cases, and also in the communication, in the field of communications. At the moment, we have quantum communications which provide for secure telecommunications on a point-to-point basis, with a limitation up to a few hundred kilometers. We are working very hard to extend this to continental scales, and this is somehow the goal of, for instance, the quantum repeaters, which can achieve that, but again, on a longer time scale. So yes, and also in quantum sensing, for instance, quantum sensing can be used in a broad range of sensing aspects, such as medical diagnostics, but not for all possible medical diagnostics. It's for instance for magnetic resonance imaging, as well as for brain science, neural activity detection, but not for all possible medical exams that one has to do. And of course, also in that case, we are expanding the range of use cases, but it's important. So one very wrong statement, one very misleading statement would be, and unfortunately sometimes we hear it from some popular press, from some companies which want to sell their strategies, that quantum is a solution for all the big challenges of humankind. That is not the case, but nevertheless, there are some very important specific problems for which quantum technologies can provide an important advantage, and therefore it is essential to understand what they are, to focus on them with the proper continuity, and to sort of try to expand the range of those problems, but sort of without naively claiming that this will be a solution for all possible problems.
Professor Calarco, in the world of the layman, the one quantum concept that is very common and very popular is that of the Schrödinger cat.
Yes.
Now, you, in an interview, you stated that we will not be able to reproduce a Schrödinger cat ever. What did you mean by that?
I meant that if we think of a cat like really a living being being put in a quantum superposition, we know for sure that this will never be possible, because the conditions for quantum coherence, which is necessary for achieving such a quantum superposition, we know that they have to do with very low temperature, very strong isolation from the external world, so they are incompatible with life. So we know that there will be never the possibility of having a living being put in such a quantum state. And this was, the reason why Schrödinger chose a cat, a living being, was to sort of make more evident his paradox. On the other hand, of course, we do have Schrödinger cat states, which are obviously not real cats, but they are, increasing numbers of atoms or quantum particles which are put in these superposition states. The current world record is a number of about 30, I think 32 such ions being put in a superposition state, but 32 ions, as we know, which is the current world record, as we know, is very, 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 very far from any sort of macroscopic size. So the point is, as much as we are not going to see teleportation of human beings, okay, this is and will remain in the domain of science fiction, we can see teleportation of individual quantum objects, such as photons, which can be used for secure communications. But as much as it may be helpful and nice and fascinating for the public to picture some of the wonderful features of quantum mechanics in terms of these paradoxes or thought experiments, at the same time, we must make sure that everybody understands that this is to be taken not literally. On the other hand, a Schrödinger cat, in the sense of this large superposition of quantum objects, even if they are only a few dozens, this is something which is extremely important and useful, because this is exactly the foundation of what we see, for instance, in quantum computers. So a quantum computer, in fact, by Rainer Blatt, is the device which has been able to create this 32 Schrödinger cat. And this is the ability, exactly the same technological ability, which is the very foundation of the creation of quantum computers. So in this sense, a Schrödinger cat as a cat is something we will never see, but as a coherent superposition of many quantum particles, yes, it is something that we will be seeing. It is something that we are already seeing in the metaphoric sense, and in the practical sense, in terms of coherent states which involve superpositions of a few dozens, for the moment, of quantum particles. And this is the ability of producing these is the very foundation of the possibility of having functioning quantum computers, which will solve some of these problems that we were mentioning before.
So Schrödinger cat, in the sense of larger and larger quantum systems of qubits, more and more qubits are possible after all.
Yes, this will be possible. What will not be possible is a cat really in the sense of the experiment imagined by Schrödinger. Yeah,
the biological cat.
Yes, exactly. So it will be a metaphorical cat. It will not be an animal. But yes, Schrödinger cat states, we will have them, and we will build quantum computers with them. Yes.
Since large quantum systems cannot be stimulated and we do not know how they will behave before we build them and test them, do you think that in the process of testing them and of the functioning of those systems, we will discover new physical laws, new correlations between the micro and the macrocosm?
Well, it's interesting you ask this question, because the hope that this may be the case is indeed one of the big motivations for my own personal research in my institute, namely exactly the sort of the border, between the microcosmos, the microscopic world, and the macroscopic world is something which interests me very, very deeply. We institute, we are conducting our research. Now, on one end, we do not expect that so we expect that the laws of quantum mechanics as we know them would be confirmed by these experiments that we are doing. So we do not expect that the creating a quantum computer will sort of at some point show that quantum mechanics is not a correct theory. That we don't expect. But what it's possible to expect is that since these quantum computers are, as a matter of fact, increasingly big, so no longer microscopic, but one can say technically mesoscopic quantum objects, that this will shed light on something which we do not yet know, which quantum mechanics does not describe directly in detail, which is precisely this transition between the microscopic and the macroscopic world, and that you were referring to. and precisely this aspect of, what is happening at the mesoscopic level. So here we do expect that there may be some relevant and interesting developments. And so this is showing, this is just one example of the fact that this research is not just about technology and using these systems, but it's still very much about basic research and understanding these systems. And there always is an interplay between the fundamental understanding and the sort of use of such phenomena. And quantum technology is a wonderful example of this constant interplay, which underscores the importance of basic science, which then gives rise to applications if it is performed and practiced, correctly, and with, again, coming back to our first argument, with the proper timeline and with the proper sort of breadth and time horizon, which allows to, worry not only about what are we going to use our quantum computer for tomorrow, let's say, but also worrying about, how are we going to understand these things.
Will quantum technologies be as disruptive for everyday life as the internet or the artificial intelligence? How will they impact our lives, let's say, in 2 or 3 decades from now?
I would say that it is difficult to say for sure at the moment. What we can say is that it could impact our lives so strongly, but whether it will actually do that depends on how successful we are going to be in really, realizing those technologies, really making them practical. And practical means not only that they can work in an actual device, but also that this device has to be robust. It has to be sufficiently cheap to produce, and so on. So for mass production and for really an impact on society, those are also important aspects. And so we have to see whether it will be possible, because we know that in principle, in theory, let's say, this is possible, but there is a famous saying which tells us that in theory and practice are the same, but in practice they are not, right? And so this, on one end, sounds like a joke, but it is a fact. And so we have to take into account that whether we will achieve the full potential will depend on the practical realizability. And this is deeply intertwined both with further fundamental research into the fundamental aspects of that that it takes to create these devices, but also research into the technological development and deployment. And this is, again, among the reasons why I was underscoring in the beginning that it would be a wrong step from the side of the government of Romania, but of any government for that matter, to just focus on the deployment side now and to leave outside the research side. Both they must go hand in hand, because we are still far from having the sort of practical realizability and applicability that would be needed to really make a huge impact on the whole of society.
As one of the most serious one, the lack of democratization of these technologies. What did you mean by that?
I mean that these technologies, and again, this connects to our initial discussion, this technology, the big danger is that those countries which have the resources, so richer countries, which have resources and infrastructure to undertake research, they will be able to develop them. But if they keep it for themselves, and if they will exclude, in other words, other countries from getting the benefit, then this will be a big problem, because it would mean that the inequalities on global scale will be enhanced. In other terms, the rich, which have the money and the ability and the resources to develop quantum technologies, they would take the advantage from that in this scenario, and the others would be left out. So it is very important, and this would be, of course, very undesirable, not only from an ideal point of view, but also from a practical point of view, because after all, if we increase those inequalities, it is going to be bad for all of us, both the richer and the less rich. So this is still the time to act, to make sure that this access is concretely available. The EuroQCI is one example of extending access and engagement to all of Europe. And also the EuroQCS, the European Quantum Computing and Simulation Infrastructure, is an example of the same. And so this is something where we can still work, and we must work to make sure that this remains an important goal that we can indeed reach.
Esteemed Professor, you mentioned among your activities and interests the involvement in art projects concerning quantum mechanics, and I was wondering how come that such really, I think, inexpressible concepts like those in quantum physics, entanglement, superposition, could be subjects for art representation.
This is a very, very interesting question, because they cannot be a subject for art representation, indeed, but art is not necessarily only representation. There are other forms of art, especially contemporary art, which are based, for instance, on performance. And I am collaborating with some artists which are sort of creating experiments, you know, like we are planning one about quantum carpets, which is patterns created by interfering light. I have a phone call with those artists tonight, actually, as a matter of fact, because they are submitting a project in which they want to involve me. And this is not about representing something, but sort of exhibiting, showing, allowing access for people to the marvel of quantum phenomena. And this could include also, you know, creating an exhibit in which people can see with their eye a single atom inside a vacuum chamber. And it is not about representation, but it is about access, like marveling and admiring the beauty of such a physical phenomena.
This could also open this very specialized and mysterious field of research to the great public and make it more acceptable, I think, and make these technologies more acceptable for the wide public.
Yes, this is indeed absolutely one of our main goals in this sense, again, in terms of democratization. So in terms of bringing this whole field from something which is just for the few elect, to something which is really for a much broader audience, a much broader public, which in which everybody should be able to access and enjoy these resources.
Professor Calarco, one final question. I read your previous interviews, and you mentioned that in the beginning of your career in the 90s, you were risking the ruin of your career by engaging into such a field like quantum physics and its applications. So you are in some way a risk taker.
Yes.
Would you say that the deployment of quantum technologies is an act of faith, a risk-taking, or a necessary and indispensable decision?
No, I would say that, well, the situation has changed a lot from 30 years ago when I was starting my career, in terms that then it was very much risk-taking, exactly as you are saying. Back then, you know, it was just some fancy fantasy or some kind of crazy thing to be done. And nowadays, instead, the progress has been so strong that even though there is still a long way to go, and this is about the hype control that we were discussing, it is about the expectation management, but still there is already evidence which we would never have expected, you know, that, you know, nowadays you can buy devices which you can buy quantum computers, you know, first quantum computers which perform some calculations. You can buy quantum communication devices which are going to be deployed in EuroQCI. And so it is still a big dream, but it is no longer, you know, a crazy dream, but there are some very concrete perspectives and already some very concrete, albeit, of course, as you correctly pointed out, sort of limited still and specific use cases, which make it, you know, no longer just a fantasy, but something which, you know, has some real perspectives and real links of really being deployed. So it is much less of a crazy risk than it was once upon a time. And but I mean, all of us from my generation, we would never have believed that this would come to this. We started doing this because of passion, because we liked it, because it's you know, crazy and funny and fun. And it's really still, I'm amazed every day at the fact that this is really coming to actual applications and real commercial devices.
Professor Calarco, thank you very much for this interview, and we wish you the best. And
wonderful
for your activity, to see your activity in the future and marvel on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.